Hello and welcome to another Commander gameplay video on the Magic Boy Productions channel. I'm Ben, aka Magic Boy on Magic Online, and today we'll be diving into some Bracket 4 gameplay with everyone's favorite lobster citizen, Ragost, along with companion Zirda the Dawnwaker. Before we get started, I want to thank my subscribers. The channel keeps growing every day, and it's great to see people connecting with my content. We're closing in on 100 subs, and to celebrate, I'd like to do something special for when we get there. A video where you get to pick the commander we feature. With that in mind, the question of the day for this video is, what commander do you want to see on the channel, and for which bracket? Comment your choice and feel free to add any stipulations or cards you'd like to see featured in the deck, and I'll use a random number generator to pick one of the responses and build a deck to discuss and play in a video. Partners and backgrounds are welcome. The only stipulation is that any cards mentioned have to be available on Magic Online. With that out of the way, let's get into the deck. This video will consist of a deck overview and then 3 different games featuring the list. We'll talk a little about the games after each one, and then wrap things up with some final thoughts on the deck, how it performed, and any changes we might want to make. The deck overview is a little longer for this video than most, so if you want, you can check out the YouTube short rapid fire deck tech for this list, and then skip to the gameplay using the links in the description. This is a Bracket 4 deck. I've never really talked about the bracket system on the channel, so I want to provide a quick overview. Wizards created the bracket system for classifying decks, and I think it's been really effective overall when used correctly. The brackets range from 1 to 5, and rather than being a power ranking, are more descriptive, and players are encouraged to have discussions about how their decks fit into a given bracket before the game begins. For players who are newer to Commander, before brackets, people tended to rate their deck's power level from 1 to 10, and the meme was that every deck was somehow just a 7. There was some truth in that joke, and it could be really difficult to form pods that played well together because players didn't always have great language for talking about their decks before games. To help players classify decks, Wizards identified a list of game changers, cards that have an inordinate impact on games when they're cast, and each bracket stipulates how many of them are allowed in a deck. This list has already seen some updating since brackets were implemented, and we can expect regular future changes that will shake things up or address problematic printing. Cough, VB, cough. Bracket 1 is Exhibition. These are decks that don't really care about winning the game, they're more interested in showing off a particular theme or a cool idea. Card choices are usually flavorful above all else, and Bracket 1 decks have no game changers, no mass land denial, and no extra turn spells, and they can't have any 2-card infinite combos. They also don't feature many tutors. Bracket 2 is Core, and this is the level that pre-constructed decks usually sit at. These decks have a game plan and can set up some very powerful turns, but those turns require setup, and there will usually be a full turn window to interact with their telegraphed wins. These decks have the same stipulations as Bracket 1 in terms of hard rules, but can play extra turn spells as long as they don't chain them. Most of the decks featured on the channel have been Bracket 3, or upgraded. Bracket 3 decks are characterized as being thoughtfully designed with synergistic and strong cards included for a focused game plan. These decks can do very powerful things starting in the mid-game, or sometimes earlier if they draw their game changers, which they're allowed to play up to 3 of. They can also include 2-card combos as long as they don't usually come online until the late game, but they still can't play MLD or chain extra turns. Bracket 3 is my preferred bracket, mostly because I find the selection of 3 game changers to be an interesting layer to deck building and enjoy a bit of restriction to work with. Bracket 4 decks like this one are optimized. They have no restrictions other than the format ban list, and the idea is that at a Bracket 4 table, everyone is focused on winning the game and agrees that any strategy or type of card is allowed. Land destruction, stacks, infinite turns, fast combos, anything and everything is on the table, literally. The final bracket, Bracket 5, is CEDH, or Competitive EDH. This is effectively a designation for a specific tournament format. The main difference between Brackets 4 and 5 is that Bracket 5 decks are built to fit into a specific metagame that changes over time. These decks usually have very specific win conditions and engines, and because of that, they also feature interaction chosen to help disrupt those win conditions and engines from opponents. This list is an artifact combo deck, aiming to win the game through one of several infinite combos available to it. That game plan is supplemented by various artifact engines and some powerful big mana plays that capitalize on our artifact ramp. Let's talk about our commander and our companion. Ragost, Death Gastronaut, is a Boros 2/2 lobster citizen with a good amount of text on it. With its culinary prowess, Ragost can make anything edible, so all of our artifacts are food in addition to their other types. We can also pay 1 mana and tap Ragost to sacrifice an artifact and deal 3 damage to all of our opponents, and we can potentially do that multiple times in a turn cycle, because at each end step, Ragost untaps itself if we've gained any life that turn. We have Zirda the Dawnwaker as our companion, which means that this Fox Elemental sits in our sideboard until we pay 3 mana at sorcery speed to add it to our hand. Zirda reduces the cost of all of our activated abilities by 2, and this includes everything from cycling to channeling to utility land activations, but most importantly, it reduces the cost of artifact abilities. Zirda can also activate to make it so something can't block, but that's not really that important. In order to companion Zirda, every single permanent in our deck has to have an activating ability, which is an interesting restriction to build around. There are tons of cards that we might want to include that are off limits, so we had to dig a little deeper to find alternatives. We have access to a few different combos, and since that's how we're winning games, it's a good place to start. The core combo that we built around is Zirda's interaction with Basalt and Brim Rim Monoliths. When played fairly, these mana rocks provide a one-shot burst of mana before that mana has to be reinvested to untap them. Zirda lowers the untap ability cost below the mana produced though, so we can generate infinite colorless mana by tapping for 3 and then only spending 1 or 2 to untap, netting mana each time. With infinite colorless mana, we usually end the game with a massive Walking Ballista, but we can also produce infinite creatures with Retrofitter Foundry, and Staff of Domination is effectively a win since it can draw our whole deck. We have a backup combo in Auriok Salvagers and Lion's Eye Diamond. This is a bit trickier to pull off, but we can essentially sacrifice the diamond for white mana, activate Salvagers to return it to hand, and then repeat that process ad infinitum, eventually getting infinite mana of every color. Since we have to discard our hand to do it, we have win conditions that work with Salvagers out of the graveyard, like Implement of Combustion or Pyrite Spellbomb, and any other cantripping artifact can let us draw our whole deck. We can also recur Walking Ballista, and if Ugin Eye of Storms is on the board already, the Salvagers loop can exile all colored permanents. It's worth noting that both these combos are incredibly tedious to perform on Magic Online. In paper, you can just announce your loop and move on to that game state, but on Moto, you actually have to do all the clicking. Usually players will just concede when the win condition is shown either way, but it is something to think about. The final combo in our deck is a powerful card advantage engine in Mystic Forge plus Sensei's Divining Top. Both of these cards are great on their own, but together they allow us to draw as many cards as we want for 1 mana apiece by activating the top and then replaying it from the top of our library. Zirda keeps us from using any of the cost reducers that make that free, but it can still find us a ton of cards at a more than reasonable rate. This deck is more inspired by Ragost than built around it, but we can make some use of the Culinary Crustacean. Being a sacrifice outlet can help protect key pieces from exile removal, and can also help our cantrip rock engine get going. Decks built around Ragost will usually aim to maximize how often it can be activated to burn out the table, and include damage multipliers to cut down that clock. We only have a few cards that synergize directly with our commander though. Nuka-Cola Vending Machine can make us food, and then make treasures when we sacrifice food, which is any artifact when Ragost is in play. Shadow Spear makes the 3 damage from Ragost lifelinking, which can buy us a lot of time in games where combat is a factor. 1000-Year Elixir lets Ragost get going and can provide an additional activation, but this effect is better used for some other cards we'll talk about later. We also have some cards that pair well with Zirda besides the ones we've already colored. Fires of Mount Doom is a clunky removal spell that sticks around and basically reads pay 1 red to draw a card with Zirda in play, and Soulbright Flamekin is another oddball card that, with Zirda, effectively lets us turn 3 mana into 8, which can be enough to get one of our combo lines going. The other nod to Ragost in our deck is an assortment of what I'm calling cantrip rocks. These are inexpensive artifacts that help us dig a little deeper, and Ragost sacrificing them can help get those wheels turning. We supplement that soft engine with artifact recursion like Goblin Engineer and Welder and Duretti Scrap Savant, which can trade out these cantrip rocks for more powerful effects, or shuffle them in and out of play for value. Welder and Engineer also really enjoy 1000-Year Elixir since it lets them activate immediately and potentially even twice. There's some fun tricks we can do like welding out a tap mana rock for a fresh one. We have some other card advantage engines as well. This deck is great at using the One Ring, and Stoneforge Mystic can grab a Skull Clamp to start getting some draw going. Faithless Looting deserves a shout out since while it isn't strictly card advantage, the selection it provides is powerful and it can help set up artifact recursion plays ahead of schedule. Jessica's Will is the best reason to play Ragost on turn 2, but even without our commander, the ramp or impulse draw it provides definitely merits its game changer status. Tutors are the best way to find our combo pieces though. We play several, including Game Changers, Enlightened Tutor, and Gamble, and Tezzeret Cruel Captain can find most of our win conditions, tons of utility pieces, and can also untap mana rocks or the One Ring. Oswald Fiddlebender also likes 1000-Year Elixir, and can transform one of our 1 or 2 drops into a monolith to go off, or help find something to dig deeper in our deck. Even before we go infinite, our deck runs on ramp and is extremely mana hungry. We have some Moxen and Mana Vault to help us get off to an early start, Soul Ring of course, and then some other more reasonable rocks that can help fix our colors or dig through our deck. Clock of Omens, along with Manifold and Voltaic Key, can untap any of our mana rocks, including the ones with expensive untap costs, to provide huge bursts of mana, and can also pair with the One Ring to draw a ton of cards, and also synergize with Mystic Forge, Sensei's Divining Top, and Retrofitter Foundry in a pinch. We run 2 different Ugins to make the most of all that mana we can produce. Ugin the Spirit Dragon is an oppressive sweeper that can eliminate everything from aggressive board states to annoying stacks pieces to engines, and Ugin Eye of the Storms can provide more targeted exile disruption. If you're planning on unleashing the Eye of the Storms, it's a good idea to hold on to free or cheap artifacts to follow up, and there are a few combinations like Sensei's Top, Mystic Forge, and Auriok Salvagers LED that can machine gun away as many colored permanents as we like. Blasphemous Act is another sweeper, and it's brutally efficient against opponents who go wide, and we supplement those control pieces with efficient targeted removal like Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares. We also run a few counter spells which can disrupt our opponents, but are better used to protect our wins. Tibalt's Trickery can deal with anything but has some backfire potential, and Reprieve can buy us a critical turn. Pyroblast and Red Elemental Blast are a nod to how vulnerable we are to counter spells ourselves, and if we don't have any blue opponents, we have a few ways to discard them for value. We have some other cards dedicated to protecting our plan as well. Teferi's protection can phase out us and our whole board to avoid a board wipe or a stack worth of interaction, and Lauren's escape can pick off a single removal spell aimed at Zirda or one of our artifacts. Deflecting Swat can also retarget interaction or fizzle counter spells, and Lightning Grease can protect our creature pieces while granting them haste to start activating their abilities. Zavin's Reclamation provides some catch-all recursion, notably letting us get back Zirda or either monolith if they end up in our graveyard. Despite playing a healthy amount of ramp, we still run 37 lands. We packed in as much utility as we could, and the color requirements of our deck aren't very intense, so we don't have many issues casting our spells. Most of the utility provided by our mana base is artifact-centric, like artifact lands that help turn on Metalcraft or can be welded in and out, and we also have recursion from Buried Ruins, tutoring from Inventor's Fair, and Fomori's Vault can let us look at a lot of cards and upgrade ones from our hand, or discard something we want to recur. Mycosynth Garden can be activated in response to artifact removal to copy a vital combo piece, or can set up explosive ramp turns, or can dig us a little deeper by copying a cantrip rock or the One Ring if we get desperate. Our other utility lands can give our combo creatures haste, impulse draw, remove attackers, dig for historic cards, or just draw us cards. It's worth noting that Zirda reduces all these activation costs, which can make them much more powerful in our deck than they usually are. We also have 2 Game Changer lands that can accelerate our plan from turn 1, in the Painful to Life Points Ancient Tomb, and the Painful to Wallets Mishra's Workshop. Our overall game plan is to do some setup, ramping, and digging, before finding a good window to add Zirda to our hand. We want to be careful about when we draw Zirda, since that can signal to our opponents that we're ready to combo, even if we were just trying to use our mana efficiently. If there isn't much else happening on the table, it might be a good idea to hold off to avoid increasing our threat index. Ragost is very expendable for us, but playing carefully with Zirda is super important, because if it gets lost, winning the game gets a lot harder. Often we won't even want to play Zirda unless we're trying to go off, but there may be some low resource situations where we have to take a risk to use the Fox for value to help claw our way back into the game. Our deck is explosive, but it's also fragile, so we want to be cautious about finding our window to combo. One thing to keep in mind is waiting until we have enough mana to untap our monoliths multiple times so that we can make infinite mana in response to removal spells, and we can play it slow to find and employ our interaction to protect our combo turn too. That's going to do it for the deck overview. Let's jump into the first of our 3 games. We win the die roll and get to go first, and our opening hand is interesting. We have 2 lands, and Goblin Engineer can likely ramp us or find something to draw cards, so that alone is probably worth keeping. Iris of Mount Doom is a card advantage engine when paired with Zirda, so that gives us a nice plan B, and Thousand Year Elixir is a slower card, but it can speed up Ragost or the Engineer with some time to set up. Swords to Plowshares is nice insurance, but most interestingly of all, we have a Blasphemous Act. This deck doesn't have many sweepers, so depending on what our opponents do, we might want to craft our game plan to avoid playing out creatures until after the act. We're definitely going to keep this one. Our first opponent is Hapatra, Vizier of Poisons. This Golgari Snake Lady dishes out -1/-1 counters when she connects for combat damage, and whenever one or more such counters are put on a creature, she makes a 1/1 Death Touch Snake. Hapatra gets on the board quickly, provides some inherent control, and has several unique combos that can win out of nowhere, so she's always a commander to watch. Our second opponent is near and dear to our heart, the Gitrog, Ravenous Ride. The first video on this channel features the frog monster, so be sure to check it out and see how far we've come with editing. Another Golgari deck, this 6/5 wants to connect after saddling a high-powered creature to draw a ton of cards and dump a ton of lands into play. There are a lot of ways to build this commander, ranging from sacrifice themes to landfall, but no matter what, it's a powerhouse once it connects and gets going. Our final opponent is the Zusa Lost But Seeking, a commander that used to strike fear in the hearts of players and still mostly does. Mono Green Ramp is a proven strategy, especially when it comes to preying on the mid-rangey decks that make up most of the commander format. We can probably expect some landfall synergies and land combos backed up by expensive and powerful threats. We start things off with Rustvale Bridge, an artifact land that enters tapped and pass the turn. Hapatra comes down on turn 1 with the help of a Swamp and a Chrome Mox, which exiles a Glowspore Shaman so it can tap for whatever color they need. Gitrog has a Forest and passes, and Azusa has the same turn, just with more snow. We draw Ancient Tomb, and the Painful Soul land goes perfectly with our plan to set our opponents back with Blasphemous Act. We play out our Thousand Year Elixir ahead of schedule and pass. Hapatra has a Blooming Marsh and then sets the tone of the game by shoving a combo piece on turn 2. Blowfly Infestation can grant infinite enters and death triggers with just a single counter on a 1 toughness creature with Hapatra on the field, so this game could be over before it starts. Fortunately, we have a Swords to Plowshares, which could help disrupt that plan. They swing Hapatra at us, dealing 2 commander damage and taking away 1 use of Ancient Tomb before passing. The Gitrog plays another Forest and casts Swiftfoot Boots, a card that I don't really love in that list, since the Gitrog monster already has haste, and people can just interact with the cards that are going to saddle it instead. Azusa reveals themselves as a stacks player, playing out another Snow Forest and then casting Sphere of Resistance. Usually combo decks hate that card, but it's actually not bad for what we're trying to do and might even help us out by slowing everyone else down while drawing aggro for that player and artifact answers for the Sphere. On our turn, we draw another Game Changer, the One Ring, and that inspires us to cast Fires of Mount Doom for 4 mana to take out Hapatra, making it unlikely they can can go off next turn. They have an Ancient Tomb of their own and take 2 damage to recast their commander. The Gitrog has a Haunted Mire, which enters tapped, and passes, probably victimized by the Sphere of Resistance. Azusa plays another Forest, and a card we hate to see with the One Ring in our hand, Haywire Might. They pass the turn with 1 green mana up to activate the pesky insect. Our draw for the turn is Retrofitter Foundry, which can make a ton of creatures with Zirda or infinite creatures with infinite mana. That makes us want access to Zirda, and with the Might out, we don't really want to run out the One Ring, so we just pay 3 to add our companion to our hand. Haywire Might also means Blowfly Infestation is potentially taken care of, so it feels safe to take a turn off here. Hapatra has an Exotic Orchard and casts Cultivate to ramp and offset the Sphere tax. They put a Swamp into play tapped and a Forest into their hand, and then go to combat and attack the Gitrog player, and the Azusa player activates the Might before they can even connect, exiling the Infestation and gaining 2 life. Hapatra connects for 2, but can't trigger with no other creatures on the board. The Frog Monster untaps and plays a 3-mana Bristly Bill, but they miss their land drop, so they can't add any counters to it. Azusa casts Nissa Resurgent Animist and passes, possibly setting up for a big turn. With the Might spent, it's time to cast the One Ring. We gain protection from everything and tap it immediately to see if we can find a land drop. Instead, we find a combo piece, Staff of Domination, which means we just need a monolith to present a win. Hapatra has that Forest, and then an Obelisk Spider, a combo piece that would have killed the table if Blowfly Infestation got to do its thing. They then cast Feed the Swarm, targeting Nissa, destroying her and losing 3 life. That clears the way for Hapatra to connect with the Azusa player since we have protection from the One Ring and the Gitrog has a blocker. Hapatra puts a -1/-1 counter on Bristly Bill and creates a snake, and the Spider sees this and triggers, draining the table for 1. Gitrog has a Forest, which Bristly Bill uses to negate the -1/-1 counter on it. They then cast a Cultivate, grabbing 2 swamps and putting 1 on the field, which triggers Bill again to get it a +1/+1 counter. They pass after that, leaving Bill back to block. Azusa has an Urza's Cave, which is a pretty frightening card in a lands deck. They have to contend with their own Sphere to cast Kenra's Transformation, which Elkifies Hapatra and draws them a card. They follow up with an Expedition map, doubling up on their land tutoring potential. We untap and lose 1 life to the 1 burden counter on our One Ring. We activate the ring first thing and find a land and a Candy Trail, which we cast, scrying 2 more lands to the bottom when it enters. We follow up by casting our Goblin Engineer, and because we don't want to set off any alarms and have the One Ring going already, we just put a Soul Ring into our graveyard in hopes of engineering it back later to expand our mana production. Hapatra has a Llanowar Wastes and then a Golgari Charm to free their commander from her enchanted status. They head to combat, sending Hapatra Azusa's way and the death-touching snake token at the Gitrog player. Both creatures connect, and Hapatra shrinks Bristly Bill and creates another snake, and the Spider drains us all again. They pass with just a single card in hand, possibly having run out of steam after their combo start. The Gitrog player has had enough of Hapatra undoing Bill's hard work, and equips the plant with Swiftfoot Boots before playing out a swamp so they can get a counter. They then cast a Relic Golem, which is really just a creature with a good power to mana cost ratio for the Gitrog monster to chomp next turn. Azusa finally makes an appearance, and those extra land drops she brings allow Arid Archway to bounce and replay a Snow Forest before they play out Glacial Chasm. We consult our list and realize that we're completely cold to this game changer, with no way to remove a land and no way to win without dealing damage. Oops. They crack their Expedition map for a Cabaret Courtyard, signaling that they might have some recursion to go with their Chasm, then pass to us, not realizing that they've wrecked our game plan with a single land. The One Ring demands 2 more life on our upkeep, and then we activate it to draw 3 cards. At this point, it seems like our best plan might be to kill the rest of the table and then try to outlast the cumulative upkeep on the Chasm. Our life total is doing okay, and we can always sacrifice the One Ring to Daretti if we need to. We're planning to wipe the board though, so we activate our Engineer, trading out our Candy Trail for a Soul Ring. We then cast Blasphemous Act for just 2 mana to clear the board of creatures and play our Retrofitter Foundry, passing with mana up to activate it. We discard our Hangerback Walker since that's really just in the deck to combo with Skull Clamp, and we're drawing plenty of cards already. Speaking of drawing cards, Hapatra casts a Phyrexian Arena, which should help them build up some more resources. The Gitrog plays a Rogue's Passage and then unleashes the Ravenous Ride. We consider using one of our removal spells to take it out as they move to equip it with the boots, but ultimately decide we can afford to take the hit since they don't have anything to sacrifice, and we're more worried about what Azusa might get up to. The Frog Monster smacks us down to 19, and then they pass. On their upkeep, Azusa sacrifices the Chasm rather than pay 2 life. They follow up by casting Ramunap Excavator, which we were kind of expecting, but instead of replaying the Chasm, they play a Forest, leaving us an opening. We create a Servo with our Foundry on their end step. The Ring brings us down to 16, but when we activate it to draw 4, we find a way to capitalize on the Chasm being off the field. We float mana with our Soul Ring to cast Oswald Fiddlebender, and thanks to the 1000-year elixir, are able to activate it immediately to sacrifice the Mana Rock and tutor Grim Monolith right onto the field. We cast Zirda and then start generating mana by tapping and untapping our Monolith while we communicate with our opponents that we have a win in hand with Staff of Domination as long as no one has any interaction. We cast the staff to prove it, and Hapatra concedes. No one else says anything though, so we keep making mana for a while, which prompts a concession from the Gitrog player, and then draw a card off the staff. We draw again and find Ugin Eye of the Storms, and cast it in case a more proactive card will do the trick. For example, if Azusa is sandbagging a Nature's Claim to try to catch us off guard. With that trigger on the stack, they finally concede, meaning that we win the game. Good game to our opponents. This was an interesting game to navigate, with two players making early plays that drew the ire of one another, allowing us to be a little patient and find our way to a win. Our decision to build our game plan around Blasphemous Act paid off, but we definitely got lucky that Haywire Might came down before the One Ring and went away quickly, and that the Azusa player left us an opening to win despite some deck building flaws. There's a good chance we could have won anyway just by outlasting them and using our limitless resources to keep them from doing much but survive, but we'll definitely be talking about some changes during our final thoughts. Apatra had a strong start, but ended up slowed down by the interaction from Azusa. Being the first one to go for it at a commander table usually isn't a great idea unless you have ways to protect your plan, and they didn't find a source of card advantage until it was too late. Unfortunately, Gitrog stumbled, and with a Sphere of Safety in play, they never quite managed to get into the game. This is as good a place as any to talk about my feeling on stacks effects, which mostly boiled down to not thinking that they're very fun. They're a valid part of the game for sure, especially at bracket 4, and can definitely help keep some of the more degenerate possibilities in the format in check, but more often than not, they just punish people who are having a rough draw disproportionately. I get why the Azusa deck has stats elements though. Extra land drops effectively break the symmetry of cards like Sphere, but running it out on turn 2 like they did meant that they were suffering through it just as much as the rest of us. We saw some elements of land synergy and combo potential from them, but their stacks piece was ultimately the biggest impact they had on the game. This game definitely helped justify 1000-year elixirs placed in the deck for me. We didn't even capitalize on the pseudo haste with our engineer, or need a second activation from Oswald, but if the game had played out a little differently and we hadn't found the One Ring, that extra value would have gone a long way. Let's see what Game 2 has in store. We lose the die roll and find ourselves going last. Our opening hand is interesting though. We never like to see 5 lands in an expensive spell, but Basalt Monolith combos with Zirda for infinite mana, and with Ragost to play on turn 2, we don't need to find much to have a shot at winning. Our first opponent is the partner pairing of Frodo Adventurous Hobbit and Sam Loyal Attendant. This Abzan duo is the most played commander in that color identity according to EDH Rec. Sam creates food tokens and makes them cheaper to crack, and Frodo gets to bear the ring whenever it attacks if you've gained 3 life, then begins drawing cards the second time that happens, meaning they have an engine in the command zone. I wouldn't be surprised to see some combos involving cards like Samwise Gamgee and Cauldron familiar either. Our second opponent is Y'shtola, Knight's Bless. She's the face commander of the Esper Final Fantasy precon, and despite being a recent release, is also the most played commander in her identity. Her first ability triggers on each end step if anyone has lost 4 or more life for any reason, providing a steady flow of card advantage, and her second ability drains the table whenever her controller casts a non-creature spell mana value 3 or greater, which can help get those sweet card draw triggers and close out the game. Y'shtola lists tend to be pretty controlling, so we might have to worry about plentiful interaction from the Cat Mom. Muldrotha the Gravetide is only the second most played commander in Sultai, having been dethroned by the Wise Mothman in recent years. This elemental avatar lets its controller cast a permanent of each type from their graveyard each turn, which they typically fuel with plenty of self-mill. There are several cards that combine especially well with Muldrotha to repeatedly annoy the table, and Sultai is an incredible color combination combining the ramp of green with the card advantage and interaction of blue and black. Frodo and Sam start us off with the Plains, and Y'shtola sets herself up well with the Rafine's Tower. Muldrotha gets off to a quick start with the Forest into Birds of Paradise. We crack our Windswept Heath for an Elegant Parlor, and find a Faithless Looting, which can help us ditch some of these lands for spells, so we surveil it to the top. The Hobbits have an Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, granting swamp real estate to everyone, and then cast the first of their 2 commanders. Y'shtola unleashes the first Game Changer and Imperial Seal, searching up a card to the top of their library at the cost of 1 mana and 2 life. They play an Exotic Orchard before passing. Muldrotha is looking to do some more ramping, so they play Woodland Cemetery and cast Yavimaya Dryad, searching up a Zagoth Triome to the battlefield tap. We cast our Faithless Looting to get max information before making any decisions, and find the incredibly powerful Jeska's Will, along with some boots. We discard Great Furnace and Quarry Mountain Monastery, and do some mathing. We'll be short of mana to win next turn, so the plan will be to cast Ragost, and then follow up with Jeska's Will the following turn, likely to seal the game. Hobbiton plays a very fitting the Shire and cast their second commander, Sam Loyal Attendant. On combat, he creates a food, and they swing Frodo at the Muldrotha player for 1 commander damage that I'm not going to track for reasons that will soon become clear. Y'shtola has an Otawara and uses it and 2 life to cast Phyrexian Metamorph, copying the Birds of Paradise to get some ramp of their own going. Muldrotha has a No Mercy, which feels like a pet card to me, and wisely swings their Dryad at us for 2 damage. Our projections had us 1 mana short last turn, and Grim Monolith puts us ahead 1 mana. We play our command tower and cast the Grim Monolith, then float some colorless to cast Jeska's Will. We get 6 red mana for targeting Frodo and Sam, and use that to cast Basalt Monolith, which we then tap to pay Zirda's companion cost and add it to our hand. We cast the Dawnwaker and have exactly 1 mana left to untap our Basalt Monolith at the reduced cost. Nobody has anything, so we make some mana, and then cast Tezzeret, tutoring up Walking Ballista. With infinite mana, we can play the construct for X equals lethal, and our opponents concede, meaning we win the match. Obviously that wasn't much of a game, but I did want to showcase the turn 3 kill. This is more of a turn 5 or 6 deck usually, but we drew exactly what we needed and nobody was able to interact with us, so we got to really flex our combo muscles. I took a chance on an awkward combo piece hand, and I think it shows that having either Monolith and lands to cast them is a very strong opener from this deck. That was a quick one, so let's do one more. We win the die roll again, hooray! Our opening hand is very strong. We have one of our monoliths, so it might be possible to enact another fast Zirda plan. We have a couple lands, and one of them is even an artifact to help turn on our Mox Opal. Tybalt's Trickery and Lauren's Escape can help us defend whatever we put together, and Goblin Welder doesn't have anything to do yet, but can be incredibly powerful once we can start activating it. Our first opponent is Omnath, Locus of Mana, the OG Omnath. This mono green deck ramps, surprise, and has some Voltron potential from the commander with enough mana production. We can expect to see plenty of ramp and big plays out of a deck like this. Next up is Ajani Nakatl Pariah. This card is a terror in 1v1 formats, but I think it's quite powerful in Commander as well. Ajani itself can represent a lot of damage and board control, and Boros token strategies have a plethora of tools at their disposal. There's also several combo loops that this deck has access to. After that, we have Braid's Arisen Nightmare. This mono-black commander likes to sacrifice permanents to bully opponents into doing the same, or let them draw cards, and in my experience tends to draw a lot of hate from the table. Keeping creatures on the board is going to be tough with a mono-black deck around, and decks like these typically have massive mana generation in the mid to late game, which can be a huge problem with a commander that has inherent card advantage. We draw Faithless Looting, which helps us with our decision of how to sequence our first few turns. We play our Plateau and use it to cast Goblin Welder, and opt to play out our Mox Opal. Maybe we're a little triggered by that Sphere of Resistance in game 1. Our opponents are off to a slower start, playing a Forest, a tap Path of Ancestry, and a Swamp respectively. We draw a combo piece, Oriok Salvagers, and then play our Rustvale Bridge and cast Faithless Looting, which finds us Jeska's Will and a fetch land. With a Grim Monolith in hand already, the powerful Ritual could easily set us up for a fast win, so we ditch our more narrow answer, Lauren's Escape, and our Monolith, since we can easily weld it back. We could do that now and put Zirda in hand, but doing so will put a target on our head and leave one of our combo pieces exposed, so we just pass the turn. Omnath just has a Forest and passes. Ajani plays a Fury Calm Snarl, revealing a Plains, but then casts a thematic but not terribly bracket 4 feeling Ajani's Mantra rather than getting their commander in play. Maybe there's some payoff for that kind of card that we'll see. Raids plays a Swamp and casts Sign in Blood, paying 2 life to draw 2 cards, but then they move to discard and discard a Swamp. We decide to hold off on activating our Welder since we might draw a cheap artifact and be able to use our Opal before we trade it out. We just find another land though, and since we don't have anything to do with infinite mana, elect to take things slow. We cast our commander, Ragost, mostly just trying to get both modes of Jeska's Will next turn. After that, we play our Wooded Foothills and pass. Omnath's turn isn't very surprising. They play a Forest and cast their commander. Ajani gains a life on their upkeep and then plays that Plains, and cast their commander. The Pariah brings a cat token with it, which is a surprisingly good blocker since taking it out will flip Ajani. Without any sacrifice fodder on turns 1 and 2, Braid elects to play a Swamp and cast Crucible of Worlds, setting up to be able to sacrifice their lands less painfully on future turns. On their end step, we crack our Foothills for Elegant Parlor, and we'd rather have Candy Trail in our graveyard for our Welder to play with, so we surveil it into the bin. We're definitely using the mana next turn, and we may want to activate Welder again, so we use it to swap our Opal and Monolith before untapping. Our draw step just finds us another land, and we make a small misplay by playing a land before we float mana with Grim Monolith and cast Jeska's Will. Omnath has 7 cards in hand, so we get 7 red mana, and Jeska's Will exiles us 2 lands and an experimental synthesizer. The synthesizer is a reroll at least, so we cast it, and when it enters it reveals the much more exciting Ugin the Spirit Dragon. We're definitely casting that, but we have some more mana to play with, so we activate our Welder to trade our synthesizer for Candy Trail, exiling a Soulbright Flamekin and scrying Mystic Forge to the top and Great Furnace to the bottom. We cast the Spirit Dragon and then uptick it to take out Ajani, basically killing the cat in the cradle. We don't think we'll need Tybalt's Trickery this turn cycle, so we decide to use our last 2 mana to crack our Candy Trail and draw the Mystic Forge, mostly so we can take advantage of auto yield for this round of turns. We could have gotten some free damage on Braids since Ragost triggers to untap thanks to the 3 life we gain, but this isn't really a nickel and dime kind of deck anyway. Omnath plays a Forest, floats 4 mana to make their commander a 5/5, and then swings at Ugin. Ragost has already done its job enabling Jeska's Will, so we chump block and send the lobster back to the kitchen, keeping Ugin's loyalty nice and high. The colorless Planeswalker will likely be a great distraction Carnifex for us while we start digging our way to a win. Ajani gains another life on their upkeep and plays a Clifftop Retreat. They attack Ugin with their cat, chipping it down to 7, then pass the turn, leaving up plenty of mana. Braids comes down after another swamp, and on their end step they sacrifice their Crucible. We aren't interested in sacrificing our only artifact, and no one else can, so Braids draws 3 and we all lose 2. They discard 3 as well. Pox, yeesh, and Metamorphosis Fanatic and Grey Merchant of Asphodel, telegraphing some reanimation aspirations. We draw another land, but touch lands are nice with Mystic Forge, which we cast. We have a Mox Amber on top, so we cast it to serve as fodder for our welder, revealing his cousin, Goblin Engineer. We weld out our Amber for the synthesizer to clear the other goblin off the top and find the One Ring, which we'd love to draw. Unfortunately, our sequencing here isn't great, because when we -3 Ugin, we cause the synthesizer to leave. We don't want to exile the One Ring and then not get to cast it, so we crack our Windswept Heath for a tap Glittering Massif, shuffle it away, revealing a Swords to Plowshares. With that minor embarrassment behind us and the board clear, we pass. Apparently mono green stacks is all the rage, because Omnath casts Hall of Gemstones. This weird old card basically has each player pick a color on their upkeep, and for that turn, lands only produce that color. This doesn't feel too impactful on this table, and might even help us by shutting down interaction during our turn. Ajani opts to set up rather than rebuild, playing a Plains in an Anointed Procession to double future cat dividends. Braids has an Urborg, and then the Telegraph reanimation spell, a Dread Return, which brings back the Metamorphosis Fanatic, which brings back Grey Merchant with a lifelink counter. Gary triggers and they have 4 devotion, so each of us loses 4 and they gain 12. We choose red for Hall of Gemstones and draw our swords. We have a Mind Stone on top, so we cast it, and then we activate Mystic Forge to exile a Great Furnace from the top, finding Staff of Domination. Normally we wouldn't want to run out a naked combo piece, but we're definitely the villain at this point, and doing so lets us dig deeper. We hit another land though, and fire off an Ugin Bolt at the Braids player. If Ajani chooses white for the Hall in their turn, we might be able to use our swords to help keep Ugin safe. Omnath plays a forest and passes. It seems like they're trying to wait for someone else to deal with Ugin before they replay their commander. Ajani does indeed choose white because they want to cast White Sun Zenith with X equal to 2, which nets them 4 cat tokens. They pass, and we crack our Mesa for a Plains and fire off our swords at the Metamorphosis Fanatic so that it can't threaten our Spirit Dragon. Braids plays a swamp before swinging Gary at Ugin, bringing him down to 4 loyalty, and after combat they recast their commander. On their end step, they sacrifice the merchant and end up drawing 2 and draining us in Omnath, while Ajani sacrifices one of their cats. We choose red in case we need to defend ourselves. We draw Deflecting Swat and find ourselves missing Ragost a little, but it's still nice to have 2 pieces of protection in hand. We cast Tezzeret, Cruel Captain from the top of our deck. This reveals a Pyroblast, which is pretty butts with no blue player at the table, so we're not even a little sad to -3 Tez and tutor up a Soul Ring. We had a lot of options here, but ultimately we already have a win with Zirda, Monolith, and Staff, so we just need enough mana to do it all in one turn while keeping up some protection. And look at that, the One Ring found its way back to us. We cast Soul Ring, adding a counter to Tezzeret when it enters, and then cast One Ring off the top of our library, picking up immunity for the turn and granting Tez another loyalty counter. We see an Inventor's Fair on top, and that seems like a fine card to draw, so we draw it with the ring, play it, and then uptick Ugin to take down Braids. We could have zeroed to clear the tokens and buy Ugin another turn, but at this point I'm more worried about what the mono black player might do, and Ugin has punched the clock plenty hard. We find a Talisman of Conviction on top with the Forge, which presents us with the decision between casting the Mana Rock or holding up Tybalt's Trickery. But then we remember Hall of Gemstones exists and just cast the Talisman, bringing our captain back up to 4 loyalty. We activate Mystic Forge to clear land and find Manifold Key. At this point, we're absolutely wrecked by a Farewell anyway, so we cast it to buff Tezzeret a little more. Finally, out of game actions, we pass to Omnath. They play their 7th Forest and cast Boundless Realms, getting 7 more of the buggers into play. If we don't win on our next turn, there's a good chance that they'll win on theirs. Ajani chooses red for the Hall, which lets us breathe a sigh of relief regarding Farewell, but after playing and cracking Evolving Wilds, they slowly tap 5 mana, and we spend about 30 seconds assuming we're getting Vandal Blasted. It's just Kazul though, and they follow up by having their cat army maul Ugin to death before passing. Braids has a Demolition Field and uses it to blow up our Inventor's Fair, which is valid, but we already have everything we need, and we don't particularly want to draw War Room, so we're happy to have a shuffle. We grab our Mountain, everyone else grabs their own basic, and their follow-up play of Solemn Simulacrum has us feeling pretty safe about our win. The Sad Robot grabs them the Swamp, and they pass to us. On our upkeep, we choose red again, limiting what the other Boros player can do to answer us, and we lose 1 life to our burden counter. We add Zirda to our hand for 3 mana, and then cast the Elemental Fox. We ask if anyone has anything, since we already have a win by using Staff to draw our deck, with a less obvious backup win in Tezzeret for Walking Ballista. We start making mana while the crickets chirp, and the Braids player lets us know they have nothing to stop us and concedes. We activate Tezzeret, minusing it to grab Walking Ballista to present a more obvious win, but our opponents are still in it. I'm a firm believer that if you put manual combos in your deck, you should be willing to play it out if people make you do it. So we start making enough mana to cast Ballista for X equal to 68. At some point in there, the Ajani player taps a land before conceding. They probably had Swords or Path and forgot about Hall of Gemstones or didn't see what color we picked. That cuts our workload in half, and eventually we have enough mana to cast our Lethal Ballista while holding up Trickery and Swap. We cast Vexing Bauble off the top for good measure, and then cast our Ballista. We start removing counters, pinging the Omnath player over and over until our victory is sealed. Good game again to our opponents. The on-mouth player probably should have just jammed into our Ugin rather than being cagey. At that point, it was us against the table, and we were far enough ahead that everyone needed to throw all the resources they could at us to have a chance. This was another mono green deck with a stacks component, and another case where the stacks probably helped the combo deck more than it hurt anyone else. Hall of Gemstones is pretty defensive overall though, and I love to see those cool older cards. Monocolor decks really should be able to punish greedy multicolor decks, but unfortunately for Omna, this table didn't have any of those. The Ajani player's deck didn't really feel like a bracket 4 deck to me, but technically bracket 4 is anyone who's willing to play with no holds barred, and there's certainly room for a lot of play with Ajani as a commander, with cards like Goblin Bombardment and Impact Tremors. Fast Ugin is almost unbeatable for a token deck though, so they really weren't able to put up much pressure. The Braid player had a slow start, and personally I think the Crucible strategy isn't a great way to go with that deck. You're inherently going to draw a lot of aggro from the table, and you really want a critical mass of things that recur themselves and come down before Braids, so it's worth mulliganing to 6 or even to 5 to find that kind of setup, since Braids can easily make up for those lost cards. I'm guessing that deck would have been a real problem if they'd had some early acceleration, but they weren't really able to leverage the cards they did end up drawing. This was another strong showing for the deck. Sometimes you can just slam an early Ugin, and even in 2025 that can still lead to a win. Without any pressure on our life total, we had plenty of time to find what we needed to win safely. I also like that our opponent's not scooping, that we actually had to show our combo in action so you can see what that looks like, and see the risks of playing these manual combo decks on Magic Online, because people can just make you go through it, and you have to be ready to do that if you don't want to concede. I really enjoyed playing this deck, but I'm not sure people enjoyed playing against it very much. I played 6 total games, and wanted to play more because I really wanted to feature at least one game that was more interactive, but I decided to stop inflicting it on the MTGO Bracket 4 players once I had 3 reasonable games to showcase. In the games I didn't include, multiple decks at the table felt like they were actually Bracket 2, leading to one player, usually us, face rolling to a win. Overall, it seemed like very few people were ready to play interaction at a Bracket 4 level, which was great for us as a combo deck, but wasn't very fun and didn't make for interesting content. I like the glass cannon feel of the Boros combo deck. The color combination has just enough interaction and recursion that you don't feel defenseless, but this deck's win can be stopped by just 1 or 2 targeted removal spells. Finding the best spot to go off with a little protection is a lot more fun to me than, say, blue combo decks that have 5 counter spells in hand to back up their win. I think one of the biggest surprises to me was how completely reluctant I was to cast Zirda unless I was going for a win. It made the cards we included that complement Zirda feel a little lackluster, so I think a more tuned version of this deck would really just treat Zirda as a combo mule and only run the best of those effects. Otherwise, I don't think there's much I would want to cut. We definitely need to find room for Chaos Warp, and then probably Sundering, Eruption, and Strip Mine in the mana base. Realizing that we had no way to deal with Glacial Chasm made it clear that the deck needs better outs to problematic lands and other non-creature permanents that might keep us from going off or prevent us from winning. If you wanted to improve the combo potential of the deck, you could definitely lean into a few more tutors, since I cut a few during deck building. More card advantage would also play well, particularly instant speed spells that do some discarding to pair with the artifact recursion engine. That's going to do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed the gameplay and discussion, and if you play at higher powered tables and enjoy fiddly combo decks, you should definitely give this list a try. Our next video will feature the final Edge of Eternity's commander we used on the channel for a while, and I'm excited to pilot my first ever secret commander deck, so be sure to subscribe to see it when it drops. As of now, I'm able to respond to every comment, so definitely let me know what you thought of today's deck, the games, the channel in general, or even just feel free to talk commander with me, and be sure to comment with what commander you'd like to see me build and pilot to celebrate 100 subs. Thanks again for watching, and good luck and have fun in your future endeavors. Magic Boy out.